Hello everyone, I am Dead Knight, and this is In It to Win It. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave respectful comments below. And today we are going to be talking about the United in Stormwind Season 89 decks, the kind of our first impressions on what decks we are seeing and liked. And I already hit Legend with a deck, and I made a video about that. And now we're moving on to some other ones. So make sure you watch that one. But today, in this video, we're going to be talking about a highly anticipated deck that came out mostly in this expansion, which is Handlock. So Handlock is a new take with some new cards on perhaps the oldest classic that there is. This is one of the preferred decks back when Hearthstone launched, and maybe Blizzard was inspired when they relaunched Classic and saw people playing Handlock again, and they just bumped out a whole bunch of support for Handlock. And in my opinion, it actually works pretty well. So what's going on with Handlock now that we didn't have before? So the cards that we're seeing that really inspired people to start playing Handlock is there's a whole bunch of cards that have a synergy with the amount of cards in your hand. I would say that the most powerful one is Entitled Customer. So this guy is a 3/2 for 6. Honestly, the stats don't really matter. When you play this guy, he battle cries to deal damage equal to your hand size to the entire board. So, pretty much this guy is a full board clear. So if you're still alive by turn 6 or turn 5 with mana reduction or the coin, then you pretty much got the game back under control, and you're looking pretty good since you'll have a full hand. So this guy is really the thing that makes this deck click, and super strong. I definitely want to run this guy, and depending on the matchup, you might even keep this guy in the mulligan because you really need a card like this. Next, we have the replacement to Mountain Giant, which was the kind of the heart and soul of Handlock back in the day. You now have a 4-mana spell that summons a minion equal with a stats equal to your hand size. So the great thing about this guy is it is a shadow spell. So you can double it with Tamsin Roame, which this deck is also running. And really on turn 3 or 4, you can get a really solid body on the board that is, it's going to force your opponent to deal with this guy, or else you have just a battering ram to take control of the board or just bash your opponent's face if they're running slow decks. So that's your your bread and butter early game minion with the hand synergy. What about other hand synergy cards? So the hyped one was the new Warlock legendary Anetheron, which is an 8/6 for 6, but it costs 1 mana if your hand is full. So this guy is actually, from what I've seen, really good. If you get this guy, you can usually get this guy out turn 3 or turn 4, which even though it doesn't do much tempo-wise, an 8/6 on turn 3 or turn 4 is still nothing to mess with. So I think this guy is a pretty solid card. It's working out pretty well, and then we also have another major mana reduction for your hand card, which is Goldshire Knoll. This guy has a 5/4 for 10, but he has rush and costs 1 less for each card in your hand. So if you have a full hand, this guy is also 1 mana, and this guy has rush, so it just immediately comes down and whacks your opponent. So that's quality early to mid game rush that's extremely cheap to help you get back in the game. And finally, the last hand size synergy card that we're going to be running is Spice Bread Baker, 3/2 for 4, and heals you for the amount of cards in your hand. So you remember shortly after your Handlock kept persisting, even after expansions kept coming out, because we had Antique Healbot, which was running in this deck for a couple of years. But now we have Spice Bread Baker, which is, it's cheaper and a lot of times ends up healing for more than the Healbot. So this guy is a really good card. Helps you stay alive, once either playing this guy early and to try to get the board back, or after you've played Entitled Customer, heal, and then boom. So these are the cards that make up kind of the basis of Handlock, but really the standout card is the new weapon, Runed Mithril Rod. So while you're drawing cards, if you draw 4 cards, then you get to reduce the cost of every card in your hand by 1. So, you get this guy out, and then next turn Backfire, and then you've immediately covered your entire quota of cards, and now you've reduced every card in your hand. So this is going to really speed you up, and that speed is what you need, because since you've been spending your early turns drawing cards, you're definitely behind on tempo. So having all this huge card advantage doesn't help you if you die. So getting that mana reduction lets you quickly play out these cards in your hand. Once you've maximized those synergies, take back the game. It's definitely what you need. So Rune Mithril Rod is a standout, arguably the best card in this deck, and one of the best cards that was printed for Warlock in United and Stormwind. So you definitely want to get this guy out as soon as possible and click it off as soon as possible. Now, as far as what you need to do to get your early game presence and survive. So there's two really great early game spells. The first is Touch of the Nathrezim, which you may recall from my video on what I thought the best card in the set was. I picked this one. We've seen it in pretty much every Warlock deck that has hit the meta so far, dealing 2 damage to a minion for 1 mana, gaining 4 life. I mean, this is just crazy good, and it's proven to be as good as we thought it was going to be. It's going to kill a minion, and on top of that, give you some life back, which you're desperately going to need. And even better, it's a shadow spell. So once again, synergizing with Tamsin. Imagine, you play Tamsin, Touch to the Nathrezim twice, killing 2 minions, gaining 8 life, and putting a must-kill minion on the board. So, comboing with Tamsin is just too good. The other card they combos really well with Tamsin that you'll need here is Drain Soul. Since they reprinted this as just, a better, buffed it and gave it lifesteal, it's just, it's huge. You absolutely want this in any deck. It's dominant, especially with Tamsin, really helps you take control back of the games, get the board back. And then I have a couple early game minions here that I really love in Handlock. The first is Meeting Stone. So Meeting Stone was one of the Wailing Caverns prints. It's a 0/2 for 1, and every turn adds an adventurer to your hand. So this lets you can play this guy on turn 1, and since it replaces itself immediately with another minion, you're not affecting your hand size. So you get to constantly replenish your hand and put minions on the board early. So that is just superb, and decks are going to try to race you down before you can play Entitled Customer, before you get some of these large minions out. So they might just ignore Meeting Stone and let you just keep populating your hand. So generating tempo, generating cards in your hand, all for 1 mana, works really well in this deck. Another early game minion is Archdruid Naralex. So this guy, again, you put him down and it's going to be pumping cards into your hand, and the cards that it pumps in are potentially game changers. Obviously, Ysera Awakens, clearing the board for 3 mana, massive in this deck. Nightmare obviously is huge. Being able to turn Meeting Stone into a minion masher. So you gotta love that, and it's a strong card overall, and especially in this deck where you get to keep putting cards in your hand. Another early game minion, which doesn't hardly even matters if you cast it, but it's Encumbered Pack Mule. So the 2/3 for 2 taunt that copies itself when you draw it. This card can, if you can draw this or life tap into it on turn 1, 2, or 3, then you can get that 10th card in your hand 1 turn earlier, which is huge for Goldshire Knoll and is huge for Anetheron. So this is great. Only problem that I've had with this is mulliganing into my starting hand. It's like Patches the Pirate all over again. It has to stay in your deck. You don't want this in your opener. You need to draw into it. Otherwise, you got to look at what cards could be problematic for this deck. So one thing we're seeing a lot in this meta is 1-turn kill decks. Not much you can do about that except hope you can beat them to the punch. But the other thing is decks that have very large minions. So you got Hand Buff Pally, bringing things that are over 10/10. You got Scabs Rogue playing the SI7 guy that pumps up, so that often gets to be above 10 health, which is why we're running Siphon Soul. Siphon Soul is, I think, a great overall single target removal. And the benefit of Siphon Soul, aside from the life, is that it also copies with Tamsin, so you have a lot of Tamsin synergy here. If you want, you can play Cascading Disaster as another option to remove these big minions, but you know, this guy, since you're not playing E-Charge to get separate copies of Cascading Disaster, I went with Siphon Soul, get that Tamsin synergy, and make sure that that minion goes down. And now, as far as you know, how are you going to win this game? There's a couple win conditions. The first one, which I absolutely love, this is running Archwitch Willow with double of the Morag Forgefiend. So the Morag Forgefiend is 8/8 for 8 taunt that gives you 8 armor when it dies. So this card is really good in the late game. It's, you know, it's hard to kill, and even if they can remove it with a spell or, you know, somehow get it off the board, it still gives you that 8 armor. So it's a great stall. But also, if you have that Archwitch Willow, you can potentially get 2 8/8 taunts on the same turn that give you 8 armor back, and usually that's insurmountable. The other win condition you're looking at is Envoy Rustwix, which also is a demon. So, you know, in case you draw one of those Forgefiends, you can still Willow into the Rustwix. So it actually works out well. And, you know, obviously you can go infinite with Rustwix if you pop the Warlock Prime. So, you know, there's always a chance to go infinite with Rustwix, which is nice. And then the final one, you just can't do a control Warlock without it anymore, is Lord Jaraxxus. You know, the guy needs no introduction. He's just so good. That huge weapon that can single-handedly take somebody out almost, and then, you know, endless hero power. It's a nice transition after you spent so much time life tapping and drawing so much of your deck to be able to turn that into Infernos instead. So, you know, always good to close out a game. So in summary, you've got some really good early game presence, really good early game survival with the spells. You've got a really great mid-range game with putting out those demons that have power, health, and attack equal to your hand size. And then, you know, you got the late game presence with the Forgefiends and Lord Jaraxxus. And because this deck is centered around drawing cards, it's pretty consistent. The more cards you draw, the better chance your deck has of running the way you intend, because you're not going to be missing those cards you need. So, you know, lots of card draw. You're always going to have card advantage over your opponent. It's just a matter of staying alive to make the most of it. So I really like this deck. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty consistent. You know, obviously against, you know, OTK decks, you know, what are you going to do? You just got to beat them to the punch. But otherwise, you know, this deck has a fighting chance against just about everything. So let me know what you think of it. You know, leave some respectful comments below. Tell me what your Warlock experience has been like, if you've used this deck yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in next time.